Nature Works podcast. Conversations with extraordinary guests who are working to protect, regenerate, and better understand the natural world. With your host, Mike Weeks.
Hey, in this episode of Nature Works podcast, I'm speaking with the legendary Tim Fijal. Maybe not legendary to you, but here in Bali, Tim is renowned on the island for his work on organic regenerative farming practices, mostly with a focus on changing the heavy chemical dependencies of local Balinese rice farmers. With Tim, in this episode, we talk about organic regenerative farming, Balinese culture, the so-called green revolution, soil health, ocean pollution, meaningful work, connection to the land, and much, much more. Now, if you enjoy this episode and others, please share it with like-minded folks who actually give a crap about the natural world. Nature Works podcast is free of all sponsors and advertising, and we aim to provide the honest and unbiased insights into how we can help protect, restore, and come on, we need to do this, regenerate the natural world. Michael Pollan's got a new book out. Do you know who Michael Pollan is?
How to Change Your Mind.
It's the other one. He's got a new one. I haven't read it, but I've listened to him in 2 podcasts, and it's all about the 5 most important plant compounds. So caffeine's one of them, and he does psilocybin. And in there, he traces the entire industrial revolution back to caffeine, and says we couldn't have done what we've done without caffeine, because it enabled people to work longer hours, to work at night, to sit around in coffee shops thinking about
I've read that too,
ideas. And everyone before that was drinking beer and gin. So everyone was drunk. And you know how that does for productivity.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing how plants
and then they tried banning it, of course. Even in the UK, it was banned in coffee shops. The King, whichever one it was, I'm not much of a historian, he banned coffee because he was concerned that too many people were gossiping and planning whilst on caffeine, which they would have been, but they wouldn't have gotten it very far with it. They were just
very
2 minutes.
interesting.
Plant compounds.
Michael Pollan is amazing.
He's amazing.
He's so influential.
Yeah.
Influenced me a lot too.
Have you seen his Cooked series on Netflix?
The Air and really cool.
The way the Air one is filmed in Morocco, I think it is, making the
Beautiful.
flatbreads. It's just it's artistic.
Yeah, amazing stuff.
So what's happening at Nalankara?
Ashtunkara.
I thought it was Nalankara.
Astunkara.
Where's Nalankara?
What is Nalankara?
I don't know. I made that up.
Question.
Is there a word, Nalankara?
No, not that I'm aware of. But I'll have to look it up in the dictionary. It probably is somewhere in the world.
Somebody said it to me somewhere. Probably when I was on coffee.
Astunkara. Astunkara Way is moving into new territory, regenerative consulting, which is very somewhat unexpected, but really exciting.
There's got to be demand for it for you to move into it, obviously, not just my little patch.
It came to us. We didn't go looking for it. So, but it's really like just even in the last couple of weeks, it's just we've had like 3 more leads, people who really want to get this sort of stuff done. It's super exciting.
And what's the ask at the moment? What are people coming to you for?
We've got a degraded area that we want to see regenerated, degraded as a result of industrial activity, where communities have become dependent on the degradation trend and the employment that it provides. So how do we turn that around and turn it into a regenerative story?
What does that mean? They become dependent upon the degradation? You mean
industry employs people. And then the people perceive that industry and their employer as either a god or the government. And they can see no other way but to destroy their ecosystem that will sustain them into the future. So, and then they find themselves without jobs when the industry moves away. So we're being brought in to look at how can you turn that around? How can we actually, the industry representative is asking us to do something about that, to reduce the dependence on them and increase the dependence on local ecosystems and interdependent communities. So that's pretty cool.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
What-
So, I mean,
Can you, without naming names about who that is, but can you tell me what the industry is that's degraded the system?
I'm not inclined to do that. I'm sorry, we've signed an NDA, so I just have to be careful about what I share on that. But
is it agriculture that's gone wrong, or is it something else?
But yeah, I mean, it's what we extract from the earth.
Right. Okay.
Just to say that.
It's like mining or something. Yeah.
So, and just people with 10 ata or 50 hectares, an island in Sumatra, an entire island that they want to regenerate, and look at how they can create permaculture system within that place.
And some English lunatic who knows nothing about farming has just taken on a bunch of rice paddies
Miami guy too, yeah.
directly behind here. Yeah.
I mean, they're all super cool projects, and I don't know how they're coming our way, but they are. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
I think you can see the trends because on YouTube there are videos that are sort of akin to watching paint dry in their excitement and their pace. They have 1.5 million views and tens of thousands of likes, and it says, "I restored a patch of land with regenerative agriculture practices." So
the awareness is just exploding, I think, and the intention that people feel like they want to get involved, they want to engage. That's definitely reflected by the number of subscribers to permaculture YouTubers and regenerative farmers, and it's mind blowing.
What's the difference between permaculture and regenerative agriculture, if there is a difference?
I mean, permaculture just implies that you're creating a closed system that is somewhat complete, doesn't rely on on inputs that need to be driven in to be able to sustain this closed system. So imagine that you have your half hectare of land, and that you can have living things on it, you can have water on it, you're recycling the water, you're creating the energy from it, you're obtaining a yield from it, but you're not reliant on bringing a truck in to add fertilizers or cow poo or even labor. Ideally that should all be managed and sustained within the system. So it is a regenerative process, because by creating a living system, by managing and curating a living system, you are nurturing a regenerative process. But regenerative agriculture is really just focused on how can we take something that has been degenerated over the last 50 years or so, actually technically over the last 12,000 years since agriculture began, and we started to very gradually take life out of the soil. And how can we regenerate? How can we start to bring life back into the soil? But regenerative, that's if we're talking about regenerative agriculture. Yeah.
So by its very nature, it needs diversity, because you can't have regenerative if you've only got one input, which is one crop.
Yes. Yeah.
So you need animals for manure.
Animals, water source, biodiversity. Yeah, absolutely. Systems if you look at nature, you rarely, aside from deserts, which are, somewhat devoid of life, you look at a forest is obviously the ultimate example. It's an extremely biodiverse, intricate web of life that's all supporting itself.
With incredible soil microbial levels. And
yes.
So we've obviously taken on this land at the back of the office, putting our money where our mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 10-year lease on it.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
You've also seen my lack of knowledge about any of this stuff. Although I am becoming something of an expert in raised beds, having watched about 100 Instagram 30-second videos on it.
That'll do it.
And I did read a couple of articles on the difference in types of raised beds.
Yeah.
I still don't really know much. But we're obviously here surrounded by monoculture.
Mm-hmm.
We've got all the pesticides and all the runoff, and we've spoken about this in depth. The water that comes down from the mountains, by the time it gets here, because we're only a mile from the sea, it's filth. It contains herbicides, it contains pesticides, the urea. The local farmers, out of necessity of been trapped into this endless cycle of doing this stuff. And so the purpose of our land is to be able to both provide fresh fruits and vegetables and the like, so partly to the local community, but to mostly show the local farmers that there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
Now, if from the perspective of what we've got out there, if other people wanted to do something like this, what are the factors that you need to consider? Because I've just jumped in, considering that somebody like yourself is going to come along, you're the expert, and bail us out of a big hole of clay. I was going to say shit then, but there's no shit in it.
If there were only shit.
Yeah. So what are the things you need to consider? I mean, can you regenerate any land anywhere?
Well, anytime you put organic material, even on a desert, you can regenerate life in soil.
Even on desert, on sandy, old, crappy, desert sand. Desertification is a major problem on the planet right now,
and
isn't
it's
it?
reversible. It's happening, and it's spreading at a rate that's unprecedented. But it is reversible with massive and very intended action, and a lot of that just comes down to separating our waste, and making the most out of our organic waste and creating biomass, starting with grasses and that turn into a whole lot of other things, just so. But your question is what to do with
well, so we've got a plot of land there that is basically a toxic rice paddy field, and it's just clay. I've stopped using the term soil because it's not soil. There's no microbes in it. It's been drowned for 30 odd years and chemically treated. You're confident that we can restore that and do something really good with it. So as an example for other people who might be interested about how you go about restoring land, what are the general principles, or is it different to each piece of land?
I guess it's dependent on what your intended outcomes are. So if you're talking to a rice farmer, and you can see if you look outside 5 meters away from us out the backside of this building, it's just all rice. And the local economy and all these farmers have been programmed into thinking that rice is the ticket. This is what they're going to do. Moreover, there's a challenge that local farmers are also perceiving rice to be associated with a goddess who is guarding those fields and is protecting and honoring the work of the forefathers who cleared the land. Because it was a forest before. So it's quite sensitive to come in and just mess with that beautiful equation that they've evolved over time. In fact, it was quite sustainable and biodiverse until around 50 years ago when the Green Revolution started. Just because you're looking at a monocrop, it doesn't mean that it's not biodiverse. It was really the chemical inputs that took away the life in the soil, and that has got farmers into this downward spiral, economically and environmental degradation, gradual and relentless. So it's not necessarily just about turning that plot of rice into, hundreds of different species. But if you even just extract the chemicals from the equation, life in the soil will start to come back, and along with it, a lot of the endemic life that used to be here. Any old farmer you talk to will tell you in Bali about how they used to eat eels from the field, and the ducks were always in. No matter where you went, there was always ducks as part of that living cycle. They were practicing permaculture until the chemical sales guys came around 50 years ago and said, no, this is not the right way to do it. That 1,200 years of ancestral knowledge that you guys have been nurturing is not really what you think it is. Yeah, we can make you guys really rich, and you can have nobody goes hungry anymore if you just start using our chemicals. Which, when they started to apply them to the fields, with such explosive growth, it seemed like, oh yeah, that might be the case. Suddenly yields are increasing, and but it didn't take long before it turned into an utter disaster. And really, the last 50 years of having the chemicals on the fields has just been a slow and degraded process of mitigating the disaster. But it's kind of at the end point now. There's not too much further that they can go. I mean, I know the head of the Subak that we've been working with for 4.5 years. One of the quotes that he
just
said,
explain what the Subak is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
People
the Subak is it's two things. It's the physical gutter and the labyrinthine canal system that Balinese established around 1,200 years ago. That is a way to distribute and share the most precious resource that Bali has, which is water. It's been recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Feature. It's incredible how they managed to share the water from the top of the volcano to the sea. So that's the Subak. The physical Subak is the canal system, but Subak also refers to the administration of that system. So a Subak is a collection of farmers that come together and balance spirituality, community connectedness, and environmental protection in a nice package called Trihitakarana to farm. Farming is a spiritual practice as much as it's a sustenance thing. It's really, really a beautiful, beautiful equation. And it's sad that chemicals had to come in and disrupt the balance. But
you're saying it's at the end of its cycle.
So we've been working with a Subak near Green School for the last 4.5 years. And the head of the Subak once said in a presentation that he made at Green School a couple of years ago, I'll never forget what he said, that if we continue to apply chemicals to the land as we are now, and he is himself, he said that we will be planting our rice in sand in another 10 years. So I think, we're seeing crop failures and ecosystems are failing, and there's not that much time left. It's really, farmers are losing their options. But when you've been trained, it used to be all of those little kubus in the rice paddies, these little huts, they were all for cows. So the cows would sit in the huts and they would create manure, which was used for the fields, and the farmer would rest in the huts. The farmer still rests in the huts, but next to them is no longer a cow, it's a pile of chemicals and a little backpack that they put 5 kilograms of it on their back and they go and spray it on their field. And over 50 years, that becomes quite an ingrained habit, especially when the government further supports it by subsidizing, and it becomes very expensive to retrofit your paddy that's already been fit by, the chemical companies to do what it's doing now. So the cost of transitioning back to natural farming, the labor of it, the uncertainty of what the yield is going to be, creates some pretty significant barriers for the farmers. So they continue to slog on, even though most of them can see this downward spiral. Every year the yield's getting a little less. Every year the chemical input's getting a little bit more. The loss of biodiversity being quite evident, and certainly they're reaching an end point.
I have a friend in Ubud who is Balinese, works for the World Bank, and he's actually taken on 4 hectares and of both his own land and other people's land. And he's replanted traditional Balinese rice. There's a strain that's, I assume, 1,000 years old or more.
Yeah.
And he's using
black soldier flies.
Larvae, yeah, that's right. As a pesticide and a fertilizer.
Wow.
And he said it took him a couple of years to show the farmers. There's no good telling them. Had to show them.
Yeah.
And now he's shown them. He's now got farmers lining up to get him to start applying the same process to their land. Beautiful. So he's not buying the land. He's basically saying, I'll work with you to regenerate it. But the rice is also selling at 2 to 3 times the price of regular Balinese rice because it's such high quality, and restaurants in Jakarta want it. So there's obviously a model there. So for us here, I've got this idea to partition half of our land off for rice, half of it off for different types of fruits and vegetables. But one of my maybe crazy ideas is to have a strip of wildflowers down the side. And that idea isn't an original one. It comes from what I understand is happening in Holland around a lot of the poppy fields and grain and wheat fields, in that they are bringing back biodiversity by making sure there's a 2-meter strip. Now, these are on huge plots of land. But I want to do the same here, put a 1-meter strip down the side.
Beautiful.
And I also think if you could get all of the rice farmers to do that, it would look stunning.
Yeah.
And they also use flowers every day in all their ceremonies, right?
Yeah.
What are the sort of simple techniques that we can do to start restoring the land?
Well, as I said, I think just removing the chemicals from the equation is the first thing.
Yeah, that's done. That's a given.
The next thing is this, another one of those habits that farmers pick up that they don't know why they do it anymore. They just do it, and is burning their rice straw. So there's massive potential to not only reduce the pollution and the CO2 emissions by stopping the burning, but also to take that biomass and just plant it in the earth. And I mean, we've already been doing that in Subaku Malambing for a few years, and there's immediate results, and it's right there. You don't have to carry in all the fertilizer, which ultimately to start a system, that's part of the drawback. It requires some effort to find where you're going to get your source of biomass and compost. Usually it's not that easily to create in situ. So that's one. That's a couple of things. Remove the chemicals, use the biomass that's there, and then introduce biodiversity. I mean, it doesn't take much to plant a beautiful 1 meter strip of flowers all around your 46 hectare and 46 hectare.
Don't do that to me.
Sorry.
46 hectare.
And then you've got your pollinators.
It already looks too big.
Yeah. I mean, you've got your pollinators and a visual, something that's visually stunning that draws people attention, and then you can start to introduce other things that are endemic plants and perennials that will also, I mean, in terms of the regenerative process, it's not just the physical, but it's the community, it's the remembering, starting to plant food that the grandparents used to eat around here. And
which are what? Because I'll plant those.
Well, I mean, sorghum, for example, goes back quite a long way. I mean, there's a status around rice. So rice became like before people were eating sweet potatoes and singkong, the cassava, sorghum. These were their staples for taro, another one, for carbohydrates. But this became perceived as poor people's food when rice came in. So just to bring those back and to reorient people to perennials that want to live here. You can plant them pretty much anywhere, even on a pile of clay, and you're still going to get a yield from it. And, in times when the cost of chemical inputs are skyrocketing as a result of urea shortages and, chemical nitrogen shortages around the world, people are going to start to take an interest in finding ways that they can eat closer to home. And planting endemics and perennials is a good way to do that.
A third of the world's fertilizers allegedly come from Russia, which right now there's
and China
some restrictions on.
Yeah, exactly. No, a lot of countries in the world. I mean, people are not realizing, what the real issue is behind the rise of food costs everywhere. But there's some serious stuff going on that is, pushing us in the direction of regeneration and regenerative agriculture. That's where all the incentive to do that is here right now. Yeah.
How much do you eat from your plot of land, your farm that you've got? You're in the cafe every day, or do you actually supply yourself with enough food? You eat your own rice, I assume.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What else?
I mean, I'm embarrassed to answer that question because my wife owns a warung, a restaurant, and I eat there every day. But we source a lot of the ingredients from farmers that we have partnerships with. Just yesterday, I was harvesting rosella that we make the tea at the restaurant with.
From your land or someone else's?
Yeah. From my land, rosella, lemongrass, ginger, cassava, sorghum. I'm starting to harvest. But I confess that I eat at my wife's restaurant most of the time. But we are growing at Subaku Mulambing. We're growing all the food, and in fact, we have a trail, a pilgrimage trail, and with each of our destinations on the trail. Sorry, I'm trying to divert the attention away from
the fact that you're not growing. Yeah,
I am growing a lot of my own food, but I'm eating it through in my wife's restaurant.
I haven't been to your restaurant. I didn't know you had a restaurant.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Nobody told me until now. Where is it?
It's in Pereira.
Which one? I know all the restaurants in Pereira.
It's right across from. I mean, Bean knows it. Ask your wife. It's right across from...
she's my wife. I don't speak to her about stuff like that. Come on.
It's across from Pescado.
Is it?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Sugi roll.
Sugi roll. Yeah. It's white. It's got wooden tables, all square tables.
Yeah.
I've been past it so many times and I thought, why would I go and get a sugi roll when I don't know what a sugi roll is? What's a sugi roll?
Sugi is my wife's name. Roll. And my kids made the name up.
I've only ever met your wife once.
Really?
Very briefly, sort of, well, I've seen her at the beach and said hello, but never had a formal introduction. This is the Mrs. Sugi roll.
Well, we'll have to rectify that.
I'll come by.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the food there, including the rice, and we have the signs on the table, you're eating regeneratively farmed rice.
Well, that should be a massive sign outside.
It should be.
I'd have stopped there 10 times a week if I'd known that. Because one of my big concerns about eating here is one of the reasons the boys love to eat in a certain sushi restaurant down the road from you. Mm-hmm. And every time I eat there, I think this is farmed salmon and it's tuna full of mercury and the rice is full of pollutants. And I don't know how many times I've said to Bean, my wife, somebody needs to do a regenerative restaurant or cafe around here. Rice is a big deal. My son's obsessed by rice. I think he's more Balinese than he lets on because all he wants to eat is rice. But I don't like him eating it because it's so toxic.
Yeah. The level of awareness on that front, when I talk to people, which I do probably a little too much with my foaming at the mouth about composting and the importance of eating close to home. To put a big sign out and say this is regeneratively farmed rice, it might get a few freaks like yourself to come in, but
I don't think so. Yeah. I think you could. I don't think a regenerative ... product has the same cachet or awareness around it as just putting organic. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming you can't say organic because it's not certified organic. But does anyone care about certifications in Bali?
Yeah, that's a good point too. Right. We are thinking about creating our own certification body around regenerative to label all the products that we purchase from farmers and resell or help them find a market for, and to indicate whether this product was farmed by youth, which is also part of the regeneration process. Yeah. And whether chemicals were applied or not, whether there was community engagement involved in the farming of the product.
I just want to be clear, farmed by youth is a positive. It's not you saying that you've got a load of 9-year-olds working on your farm.
No, 70% of farmers are over 60 years old in Bali, and it's the same the world over. Farmers are getting older, and the young ones don't want to farm. The previous generation did all the work. They're seeing their parents and grandparents suffer, their bodies as a result of it. Several of them dying of cancer, like my grandfather did, as a result of farming with chemicals. And why would they do that when they could go off and take a paycheck from an air-conditioned hotel or restaurant and wear a uniform and get
COVID's changed that, though, hasn't it?
That's why we have on our T-shirt, Kapan lagi kalau bukan sekarang. Yeah.
Just remind me what that says.
If not now, then when? So, all these people in the tourism industry went back to their ancestral land and had nothing better to do, nothing else to do to sustain themselves, but get their hands in the earth and start farming again. So we're talking to them and they're saying, actually, we kind of like it here with our families and it's a beautiful place. Don't savor the idea of going back to Kuta or Seminyak or wherever but they feel like they have no choice. So our challenge is how do we keep them there, and how do we how do we nurture this next generation of like a massive army of regenerative farmers? That's what we want to do.
In your network of farmers and this world that you know, I'm only very recently coming into it, and it looks like there's a lot of this stuff going on, albeit in small pockets, but all over the world. And in Africa, some in the Middle East. I met a guy last week in Jakarta who had been working in Saudi Arabia and had gone out there with his totally all organic, natural, bacterial-based fertilizer and said, I'm going to grow plants here in the desert. And they almost removed him because they thought he was a lunatic, because nobody had seen plants grow there in a bazillion years. Yeah. And within a year or two, he had sheikhs visiting him, and one of them bought him a Ferrari.
Wow.
Which seems to be the gift that you give.
That's all I need to do to get a Ferrari.
What are you going to do with a Ferrari in Bali? There's a guy who has a Lamborghini and a Ferrari here. It's embarrassing, as he's trying to turn it on the tiny little streets with the engine revving. Oh, no. That's another conversation. Yeah. But are there areas in the world that you're aware of that are really, really knocking it out of the park in this regard on the regenerative approach? Is Bali up there, or is it just getting started?
I think Bali's just getting started, and we really hope to accelerate that transition. That's our intention. I think the States is providing a pretty good example. People like Zach Bush, waving the flag and getting a pretty good following and supporting a lot of, the reversing the trend of the go big or go home that happened when the Green Revolution started, and 1 million farmers turned into like 1,000 farmers. I think farming is truly becoming sexy again in the States, and eating close to home, and that sort of thing. Maybe in Canada to some degree as well. That seems to be happening there. That farming would become trendy and hip and cool.
Is that why you got into it? Because you wanted to look sexy?
Yeah, that's my main decision, my factor for making any decisions in my life. Yeah.
Because when I've seen you up to your knees in mud, I've thought, wow,
like that look.
As a sexy guy. Yeah. No, but why did you get into it? How did you get into this whole?
I think I've always loved being with plants, and I think I also, my grandparents were all market gardeners in Canada, and struggled through difficult times. They came over prior to the Depression, got through the Depression, and I think that history in my family and connection to farming has always kind of resonated with me. The salt of the land, salt of the earth type people that my grandparents were, and and I was just brought up with plants, identifying plants, and loving the garden. So I think that's always been in me, but that really excelled. In fact, I came to Bali as a result of a single sentence that the founder of Green School uttered, which is, our kids don't learn about the rice cycle, they live the rice cycle. And that learning through doing, and closeness with nature, integration with nature, awareness that we're one with nature, that just happens when you're in the field, when you're gardening. And I think that's where we all need to be. So I've always felt that in a very gut level. And I think now more than ever is that's what we all are being called to do. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to be a farmer. That's always the question that people ask. Oh, that means I have to be a farmer too. It's like, well, you could plant a little bit of tomatoes on your windowsill, and that would already be something. And that's the thing, is like that action, people are like, I think we've been so removed from nature and in our urban centers, and so conditioned to think that everything that we need to eat is going to have to come from a supermarket. But it's beautiful that when we come back to it and we realize that it can be as simple as growing pots of vegetables on our windowsill, if that's all that we have. When we do that, it makes us feel good, coming back and reconnecting with nature and being in awe that it's satisfying. So it's always just felt that way to me, and I love sharing that with other people. So I've been in education for a long time, and so that's been my thing.
Did you start in Green School on all of this stuff? How long have you been there, or had been there?
I was at Green School for 9 years, and I left 2 years ago.
And you were teaching agriculture or rice practice, or were you a regular teacher?
Well, I really wanted to see the rice cycle happen at Green School after I heard that sentence uttered by the founder, and it wasn't really happening. And after years, I just decided that I would take my team and take them out to the rice paddies and find an old farmer that could do that with us. And then that evolved into a course that your wife took, actually, the rice cycle course. And that evolved into so many things that I could never have imagined. That was a really calling from the deep to come here and engage in the rice cycle.
I'm embarrassed to say that when she signed up for that course, which was in the first month that we arrived in Bali, what I said to her, what are you doing? Like, you've got better things to be doing with your time, surely, than a rice course. No. You know, we're in Bali. It's part of the life cycle here, and it's part of, I mean, it's a core foundational aspect of life here. And she said, and it's organic, and you know, we eat organic, and it's regenerative, and I want to get my feet in the soil, and I want the kids to see it. And at the time, so what's that, about 17 months ago it would be. And I just poo-pooed the whole thing. Said, you're out of your mind. No, I am not coming to a rice course. And I'm ashamed to say that now, because I am a rice farmer.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's great.
Haven't actually done any farming yet. I remembered.
But you got the label. That's the main
I got the
thing.
label. So I can put it on my business card. I can get one of the hats. And you say it's sexy, so therefore I'll expect to get more attention from all corners of the rice paddy field. But I'm somebody who really, I'm not an environmentalist, but I do care enormously about the environment. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. Mostly I'm doing this podcast because I want to learn as well. But the one thing that has struck me coming here from where we lived before, which is in Boulder, Colorado, is the lack of access here to actually being able to just walk in nature. I used to be able to walk out my back door and my yard. Well, in the wintertime, I would find cougar tracks in the snow this big, and we've had cougars up our trees. There were great horned owls nesting in our pines. This is my backyard. There were deer coming in at all stages of growth. We would have snakes in the backyard, lizards, rabbits. They started reducing as the hawk chicks started to fledge. But that really did feel like we were in a cycle. I come here and you're lucky. We see monitor lizards in the subac. I don't know how they survive because the subacs are so filthy. We're working on that. We're going to clean all that up. But other than that, seeing a few butterflies and some cobras. We get cobras in our backyard. And there used to be rats in the house we lived in. But the cobras have taken care of those. Exactly. Yeah. But it doesn't, Bali's doesn't, certainly down here in the lowlands, doesn't feel like it's a wild place. Doesn't seem to have much diversity. Is it different up in the mountains? Are there areas here that are different to that? If I wanted a nature fix, a true nature fix, where would I go to get that?
Well, we have a trail that we take people on and to give them the nature fix and that reconnection. And yeah, truth be told, it feels like nature. You know, you look at the rice paddies. Who looks at the rice paddies and those gorgeous views, flooded anaerobic systems where death is happening under the surface
full of chemicals.
Yeah,
no butterflies.
But people don't see that, of course. You know, there's blue sky. There's the reflection of the paddies.
Yeah, that's the ultimate greenwash.
Yeah. Well, it kind of is, but it's still nature doing its thing to some degree.
With the help of Monsanto.
Yeah. But around them, there's riparian zones that are stunning. You know,
which zones?
Riparian zones next to the river.
What are riparian zones?
It's the area next to the river that the Balinese have been very respectful of protecting. So that's why a lot of the villas in Bali have such great views, because the spirits live close to the river, and we're given access to the area behind their villages where there's a sloping view of a rice paddy and then the beautiful forest next to the river. So those forests are still really biodiverse. They're not planted so much, these riparian zones. And they're gorgeous. You know, you look at river ravines. But yeah, you know, there are some incredible views in the north where we want people, and it's breathtaking. But when you look more closely at what they're looking at, yeah, it's mostly clove trees, for example, which have coffee grown underneath. And it's like just not even a whisper of what that was as a forest a couple hundred years ago. It's all been cleared and replanted for agriculture. But there are like Sangay Monkey Forest is a primary forest. It still exists, and up in the mountains near Batu Karu, there's some really beautiful areas and forests that are many generations old.
There aren't many species of animals here, though, are there?
The tigers are gone.
Tigers are gone. Rhinos have gone.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs have gone.
There's still a lot of birds, and there's the wild boars in West Bali still exist.
Oh, they have them here.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not too biodiverse on the fauna spectrum.
No one's going on safari any day soon. What's been your experience over the time that you've been here with the litter, with the garbage in the waterways?
Yeah.
Because it breaks my heart every day.
It breaks everybody's heart. It's hard to be here for more than a day without having this conversation. And in fact, I was just sharing. Can I share a little testimonial that
please do.
One of our pilgrims.
What do you mean by pilgrims? Because you sound like a religious nut now. And
let me just find it first. I'm sorry. I should. We take people across Bali on a pilgrimage trail with the intention to reconnect people with nature and the source of their food. So, I'm not going to fiddle with my phone and try and find the testimonial, but it's really hard hitting.
No, do it.
Really?
Yeah, if it takes you a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a minute.
I can sing a song.
Can you get on with that, and I'll look for this.
That would put people off ever listening again.
Look I found it already.
That was easy.
Okay, so this man named Philippe is French, and he walked from coast to coast in Bali for 10 days. And he's a farmer as well, a bamboo farmer from France. And he walked with his wife and son across Bali with us. And he said, my values, my philosophy, my daily life in France is Astunkara Way. That's the name of our project. Coming to Bali, I hoped, meet local farmers, share their daily life, learn more about bamboo. Astunkara Way was way beyond my expectations. I am proud to have participated in your pilgrimage. The trio, and this is our trail team, Echi, Novi, Oka, embody the joy of living, respect, and exemplary professionalism. Congratulations. The energies, the colors, the landscapes, the people of Bali are extraordinary. But that gigantic pollution comes to ruin everything. It's too much for me. It's unbearable. I can't wait to go home. I'm sorry.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm going to try and share this with the Minister of Tourism on.
That's really... That's just kicked me in the stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. But I was out there on the trail a couple of days ago with another group of 9 people, and we were having the same conversation at the table and just trying to make sense of how this is possible in a place where the Balinese are so, this is so integral to their fundamental philosophy of life is balance with nature.
Yeah.
So how can it be possible that the plastic pollution is what it is?
And the burning.
Yeah.
So this is the bit I don't get. You talk about this goddess. Mm-hmm. What's her name? Who is in charge? Dewey. Mm-hmm. The goddess of...
Dewi Sri.
Okay, so she's gifted rice. Mm-hmm. But she's gifted it along with now the necessity to use chemicals that everyone knows are bad for the environment. Mm-hmm. The farmers here know. I've spoken to them. Mm-hmm. In fact, they've even said to me directly, I've got a really good relationship with a couple of the farmers here. And they've even said, don't want to go organic, it's too much work. Mm-hmm. They've actually said we're lazy. Mm-hmm. From their own mouths, we're lazy. Mm-hmm. Just carry on spraying. I've had multiple conversations with farmers at the back here, next to the Subak, because I'm actually this afternoon meeting the head of the Subac to get clearance to put garbage traps in. And I've said to them, I will clear the garbage myself. I will. And our team will put the traps in. We want to put the vetiver reeds and clean the water, take the pollutants out, measure everything, make sure it's quantified and the likes. And one of the responses, which came through Sarah, my assistant who translated, I had to ask her to ask him again because he said, what garbage? And we were standing in front of a pile of garbage that literally looked like somebody had dumped a truck into what could be one of the most stunning water systems. And I said, all of this garbage back. This. Oh, no, that washes away. Yeah, it washes away into your ocean. And it covers your beaches and it gets caught in all the trees and everything else. And you talk about the Subac system. It's a UNESCO World Heritage. It's assigned that status. It's like it is the biggest garbage dump I've seen, or the most distributed garbage dump I've seen. I don't get you know the Balinese people way better than I do, and from what I understand, they have an immense amount of respect for you. Those that are those rice farmers that know you. Have you spoken to them directly about their relationship with all of this stuff, the chemicals, the plastic, the burning, because they all know it's bad. They guiltily look at me when I'm walking along the street every morning. I pick all the garbage up that gets thrown. There was a massive ceremony last night, which means that first thing I have to do is bring down a bag in their own streets, in this beautiful area. I'm picking up dozens of plastic water tubs and straws and dog ends in our office out the front here. And just crap everywhere, masks, and I filled a bag this morning. But if you asked any of these people, they would say, like you're saying, that they care and love, and I mean they're so connected to their place, like more than anyone I've ever seen. Their desire to protect the place, but it doesn't come from a protection from themselves. What's the relationship? Have you got insights into how it's happening?
We've had so many conversations about this, and I think the great challenge is to remove judgment from the equation when we have these conversations. And our what we share with local people is more often than not just really steeped in judgment. And I was reminded by, and that's not productive. It's just it's not constructive, and it gets heated pretty fast. And if you're here on the island for a long time, you're not going to do yourself any favors by pushing things too hard. So yeah, I find myself frequently bumping up against that boundary of stifling some frustration for sure. But I was reminded by one of the pilgrims when I went to visit them the other day on the trail. We're both from Canada, and we were remembering, actually we grew up in the same province, and we were remembering this, I can clearly see it heading into the Banff National Park. And when I was a little kid in the early 70s, I clearly remember seeing people chuck their McDonald's bags out the window into the ditches, and you would see litter in the ditches of the national park. And we were reflecting on that and realizing that, we did know that there was something bad about that. If we saw somebody do it, you'd go, that guy's a bad guy, but that was part of the transition. And I think what really catalyzed the full transition to no more litter, very, very little in Canada. We just don't really see that much litter in ditches or waterways. It was the signs that went up that said, $100 fine for littering. And I really think it's a combination of, rather than put it on the shoulders of the Balinese, which is a massive educational effort that's been well underway already by, a few people that we know who have spearheaded that movement. That's a very slow process, but I think to escalate and to accelerate the process, a punitive measure that the government gets involved and starts to, just say, this is not correct behavior. You're going to have to pay like $10, and that's going to hurt. if you're caught littering. And responsibility for the corporations that create this waste that can't be recycled, because you're not going to see any tins or plastic bottles or anything that can be monetized in the waterways. It's all the stuff that it's useless. So if it's not monetized, then it's going to end up on the reefs and in the rivers and in the waterways. So, the likes of, all the companies that are producing this waste are going to have to start to take responsibility about the packaging.
And they are in Western countries where they are, certain countries now you can't get plastic bags. You have to pay for and that's the case in Indonesia, isn't it? You're not meant to get plastic bags. All the small stall holders will always give them to you in plastic straws. There's a whole bunch of restaurants now that I've gone into where I refuse straws, and then they say they're cassava straws or they're coconut straws, and they're terrible, but they go soggy within 3 sips, but great. They're going to break down their compost. I had the same conversation only a few weeks ago about my youth growing up in, I grew up in a very poor part of Bristol where nobody gave a flying shit about their environment. Our streets were full of garbage. My grandfather used to throw his cigarette, lovely guy, but he'd throw his cigarette packets straight out the window. And then do the window back up because he didn't want to lose the smoke with us breathing it all in his car. But garbage was everywhere. And then in the 80s, they brought in these campaigns. And I don't remember them except for seeing some arrogant, cocky person throwing a piece of garbage over their shoulder and then some big shame piece about it. And of course, the problem we have now, back then there were 3 channels. So you saw it because you watched the ads. Because everyone watched the ads back then, unless you were making a cup of tea. Now everything's so distributed, nobody's watching TV. So it's a big challenge to try and educate people. And I know it's happening in the school systems and the likes. But for me, I've come up with an idea that our company is behind. And that is to put together a prize. And I've already checked in with some Balinese friends to make sure this isn't in any way patronizing. But we're going to offer a $100,000 prize to the Banjar and Subak in the region that shows within a certain period of time, I think it'll be about 9 months, the biggest improvement and innovation for litter removal and collection and out of the Subaks. And we're going to send around secret spies to those areas to go and look and monitor. So there are hundreds, if not 1,000 or more Banjars in Bali. But for everyone that enters, we'll actually go there first. We'll go and look at the problem and we'll assess it. And we may split those prizes up. So the biggest innovation prize, so it's not just one. But I want to get that to $1 million prize, and maybe even a bit like the X prize, which I think is $10 million, which is an innovation prize. And so motivate people to be able to support their local Banjars by getting involved and making it competitive. And seeing if that has an impact. Because I have been scratching my head since I got here, scratching my head, wiping my tears. And I think if in our time, over the next 5 or 10 years, we can actually fix just one thing, if it's not the agriculture, then at least the garbage, then that's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's a multi-pronged approach that's required. And, the CNN Hero of the Year, the winner was Pakmade Janur, who won because of his innovation around, the plastic exchange.
No, I don't know anything about this.
And he just won $100,000 from CNN.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what was the competition?
It's the CNN Hero of the World.
Oh, Hero of the
Yeah. So applicants from all over the world, and for the second time, a Balinese person won it. So his plastic exchange is based on the premise of people collecting waste from their villages and exchanging it for rice.
Yeah, I've heard about that program. Doesn't always work though, does it? There's some drawbacks to it.
I mean, I see a bit of a sustainability crisis with that because it also requires funding. So it's a beautiful initiative, and I don't want to say anything bad about it. I think it's already had some really amazing results, but I'm just not sure. Maybe if people establish the habit of doing that, then it will be sustained. But at some point, the funding won't be there to continue to pay for the rice to provide it for an exchange. So the habit. It's all. I mean, all of this regenerative farming, everything. It's the habit of putting 5 kilograms of chemicals on your back and thinking that anything but that is inconvenient and too much heavy work. The same goes with plastic. Just chuck it in the river. It's easy. So I think it's a process.
The gates are opening up again. People are coming back into Bali.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been here outside of COVID. That's not true. I came here 26 years ago on my way back from Australia, stopped in Kuta for a few days and said, what a complete dump. I'm never coming back again.
I did that.
Because I thought Bali was this mystical, magical place. And I'd get off the plane and the first thing I see is like McDonald's.
Same.
Yeah. And here we are. I've never been in love with a place as much as I am with the people. And it's mostly the people. I mean, it's the place as well. And it's the environment, the temperature, and the likes, but it's mostly the people. I'm completely enamored by the Balinese culture. I'm enamored by most of Indonesian culture. I spend a lot of time in Jakarta and I have a lot of friends there now. But the Balinese are a very special type of people. It's like I found my people, even though I don't understand them. I appreciate them, but I don't understand them.
Yeah.
And I don't speak Balinese. And so there's all of those little challenges, but just my small interactions, like these are my kind of people. But anyway, we're opening up again. Tourism's going to probably come flooding back. With your insights and knowing many people in the various communities, obviously the money needs to come back in because people have been struggling on their backsides. But what are you predicting from the next sort of 6 months or year? Do you think people will flood back into the tourist areas from the mountains where they've been working on their farms? Do you think the litter is going to increase? Are you dreading it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going back and forth to Seminyak. We have a client in Seminyak that I've been visiting for the last 2 months, and it's just been clear sailing for up until last week. And it was just like suddenly one day, the traffic, everything is clogged, and it's just like before. And so I'm not savoring this, but I know a lot of Balinese are, and God bless them. I completely understand why. Their eyes are lighting up again with the possibility of, repainting those guest houses that are now filled with mold and having people start to stream in again, for sure. It's their sustenance. 80% of this island's economy, I think, is based on tourism. So for sure.
But there was a lot of talk about, before the tourists come back, that Bali needs to do it differently. These cheap holidays where lots of Australians come in, and I'm just picking on Australians, but they're one of the largest numbers of people that come in and just get drunk on the beach in Kuta and have cheap package holidays. It's a throwaway culture. They never really leave Kuta, so they don't see or get to appreciate Bali for what it really is. From an environmental perspective, though, do you think anything's going to be different, or is it going to get back to business as usual? Has there been any measures put in place?
Well, I know that that the governor has said that we want to do away with this cheap tourism. I'm not sure what measures will be put in place to make that happen. I mean, my sense is that even if it were twice the price, Australians have an allegiance with Bali and Kuta.
It's the far northern territories of Australia.
And I mean, they've brought a lot of benefit to those families, as much as they've also paved over all of Kuta that used to be rice paddies. It is what it is now, and that's it's an engine for a lot of people's livelihoods now. So I suspect that's going to come back, despite the intentions of the Balinese government to put a halt on that type of tourism. But I think the world over, people are likely, because flying is going to be more expensive, and shaming on hopping on flights to go here and there, and then carbon shaming and that sort of thing is probably going to become more and more a thing. I think people will travel with purpose more and come for longer holidays, and I think there will be an increasing demand to, if you're going to go somewhere, you better make a positive change by doing that. So, I mean, that's what we're betting on. And I think for the time being, maybe a fringe of the population, the general population that travels to Bali. But Astunkara, it will be a growing one.
So people are going to come in they're going for Astunkara, they're going to go on your walks. Tell me about the walks. Give me your biggest sales pitch right now. Why would I go on it?
Well, I mean, I guess if we were to sell it to people, it would be like, because you need it. You need to be reconnected with nature and the source of your food. And when you do that, it feels really good. And not just that, but it's a communal experience. You do it like with 8 other people, and you sleep on a platform in nature together.
Mosquito nets?
Mosquito nets, yes. But just that process of reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with local communities where people have a simple and beautiful and connected way of life, both with the surrounding community and with nature. It's deeply inspiring. But I mean, underlying...
What happens?
What happens?
Yeah, I mean, I know you go on walks through the paddy fields.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound overly inspiring. Why? What am I going to get from it?
Well, that's why we call it a pilgrimage. It's not a tour. It's not a trek. It's a journey. And a journey that connects you from coast to coast with people who are taking regenerative action, or where we see locations where regenerative action is a high potential for regenerative action. So, and by being witness to that, you are inspired to take regenerative action yourself back when you go home, wherever you came from. And also by your walking the trail, regenerative action can look like, for example, we visit a destination where the people who are feeding us have a farm. They may have farmed with chemicals before, but now they're being supported through this regenerative tourism to not do that anymore, because they have an offset to a financial offset from the reduction in the yields potentially, because they have another layer of revenue coming in through people coming by. So moreover, they had a warung there, for example, a little restaurant where they would sell things that local people are eating these days. It's now just like rice became the status food. Now the status food is like Indomie, packaged
those pot noodle things. My kids,
MSG, and sausages, spices, and plastic covered, and made from wheat from America.
They're awful. They're unbelievably awful.
But this has become Indonesia's national food. So when we come in as foreigners and we say, hey, we're not interested in this, we actually want to know how your grandparents ate. And then they rediscover that. The regeneration is happening at the village level. It's happening in the hearts of the people who are walking and experiencing the perennial plants and the traditional ways of life and eating. And it's like, yeah, it's two-pronged, right? Both regeneration from the local community and regeneration in the hearts and minds of the people who are walking the trail. So that the regenerative tourist is actually walking this, it's almost like a neural network that just gets reinforced with every pilgrim that walks it. And people can see in the local community that there's something good happening here that maybe I want to replicate. And we can empower the people in the local community, not that they're not already empowered themselves, but when they can create something great like that inspires international people to come there and take notice, their neighbors want to do the same thing. So we see it as like a bunch of nodes on a neural network that'll just continue to expand. And the paths will also expand to different trails that we hope will not just go around Bali, but to neighboring islands and maybe even to neighboring countries and maybe even around the world. That's the hope.
You're going to come and visit our plot.
Yes.
You're going to say, this is how
your plot.
This is how not to do it. See that English bloke who's sweating over there?
Yeah. But this actually, your land is right on our trail.
Right. Okay.
So we likely will drop by. And
don't go walking across my land. I'm like an English landowner. Yeah. Get off my land. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, we've got a lot of work on.
Yes, we do.
All of us. And I want to talk to you after this as well about the specifics about getting my cow manure into hot manure my rice that's sat there on the land.
Plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time. I'm going to get you back at some point to discuss updates as we move along on the land. But,
all right.
Yeah. And where can people find you? What's the website?
www.astunkaraway.com.
Spell it, because I can't even spell it.
S like Sam, TUNGKARAWAY. Astunkaraway.com.
And it's a 1 week walk through the rice paddies.
There's a 10-day sea to sea or a 5-day tree to sea.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, when I go bankrupt and have lots of time on my hands because I've put all my money into rice paddy fields, I'll come on the 10-day walk.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.